Hey everyone, welcome to Fantasy Football in the Six podcast. I'm your host Anthony Bandu, and joined with me is Johnny Shermer. We're going to talk about some fantasy football this week, and some of the games that happened on Sunday. Recapping some of our picks that we've made for our starts and sits, and we're going to go through some of the injuries that happened over the course of the game on Sunday and the reports that came out. And also, again, the starts and sits. That's always a fun thing to talk about. So let's dive on into it. We're going to also just talk about too the waiver wires as well. Completely forgot about that. We're gonna have to tell you guys who to pick up for waiver wires on Wednesday, and yeah, we'll just start out with a recap from one of the games on Sunday, which was the Tennessee Titans and Bengals. If Johnny want to share some of the info you got from watching that game.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how much you watched of that game actually, but it was definitely a wild one. Obviously, I don't think any of us really expected the Bengals to take off like they did, and the Titans. I don't even think they got a touchdown until the fourth quarter. So I definitely that was a wild one again. Joe Burrow did really well actually. He threw a couple of touchdowns. And when you look at the Titans, it didn't really look good for them. Tannehill had an okay game, I guess, when it hit the fourth quarter. AJ Brown didn't really look great. Corey Davis actually did look very good, surprisingly. I don't recall them using him too much this season, but he is looking really good lately. But yeah, I'm not too sure again how much you watched of that one.
Yeah, I was just watching the highlights a bit myself. Derrick Henry, as always, a monstrous game with 112 rush yards and his touchdown. And then, Corey Davis, like you said, surprisingly caught me a bit by surprise there with 128 yards and a TD for himself. So he had himself quite a day. Joe Burrow, I was getting the notifications on my phone for him, throwing his two TDs, throwing for 249 yards. And Samaje Perine, the other running back for the Bengals, he kind of surprised me there with 10 carries and 32 yards, and a TD as well. Just never thought that they were going to use him. I thought it was kind of like Joe Mixon, Giovanni Bernard, but it's kind of nice to see a little bit of another option there with Perine, and I got my boy there, Tyler Boyd. 6 receptions, 67 yards, and a TD. Kind of a good game for him. It was a pretty good fantasy option for me and one of my wide receivers that I'm always riding with, just because of Joe Burrow.
Yeah, going off of what you said about Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins also had a really good game as well with 78 receiving yards. No touchdowns, but I think it's definitely Higgins and Boyd's field now. I guess we'll see this week if AJ Green remains on the team or not with tomorrow's deadline. But yeah, I really liked what I saw from the Bengals offense.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see if they move AJ Green to another team, maybe the New England Patriots. That would be
Hey, you never
interesting.
know.
Yeah, that would be pretty interesting. One of the games that I watched for myself was the Las Vegas Raiders and the Cleveland Browns. This game, I kind of wanted to gouge my eyeballs out because I was relying on Baker Mayfield to pull me through, put me over the hump, get me some points, to build up my standings in the league. Still hopefully I'm going to be inside the playoff spot there. I'm kind of on the outside looking in. But Baker Mayfield, 12 completions made, 25 attempts, 122 yards, 6 rush, 29 yards, no TDs, no picks. But like Baker, I'm kind of expecting more from you after you were kind of having that dog mentality that you had from last week. After OBJ got injured. Kareem Hunt had 14 rush, 66 yards, 2 receptions, 7 yards, no TDs. There was nothing really going on here for the Browns offensively. And, the Raiders had a bit of, juice in them, I guess. Their kicker, Daniel Carlson, got, 3 field goals. He got an extra point made. Hunter Renfro had a TD of the game. Henry Ruggs didn't do much for himself. Josh Jacobs, 31 carries, 128 yards. Pretty good game for him. If you had him in your starting lineup, very good option. So yeah, that was pretty much the game. It was all about like kicking for me. It was very boring, very dull. Daniel Carlson had probably the most points for my team at some point, and I was just kind of losing my mind that my kicker had the most with 10 points. It was very slow game. Hopefully next week is a good opportunity for the Raiders. I think they are playing. They're playing the Chargers. Good. That'll be a better matchup for them. I think. More points on the board there for that game, probably with Justin Herbert. But yeah, what was the other game you happened to watch there, Johnny?
I took a look at the Thursday night matchup between Atlanta and Carolina. I think everyone will watch that, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll gladly talk about it. Obviously, there was a key injury there, Calvin Ridley. I really do not like to see him going down since I have him on two of my teams this year. So that really sucks. It looks like he's going to be out next week, most likely, just because the team has a bye week the following week. So there's really no point in risking him injuring himself again. So that sucks for me. But that's okay. Going back to Carolina's side, Teddy, I thought he was going to do really well. Obviously, the Falcons have a terrible defense, so I thought he was going to, get at least 2 passing touchdowns. That was not the case. He had 1 passing touchdown, which is okay, but he didn't have really any yards, 176 passing yards. He had an interception in there right at the end of the game to really seal the deal for the Falcons win. Yeah, he did not look good. Curtis Samuel, he looked very good. He had 3 touchdowns, I believe, 2 or 3 actually. But yeah, he looked great. He looked better than DJ Moore. He looked better than Robbie Anderson. So there's 3 really good receivers there in Carolina. So we should definitely keep our eyes out for Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, Teddy was he was one of my guys for the stardom list that we had for the games on Sunday, against the Atlanta the first time around, 22.73 points, which is pretty good. And then, now coming into this one, I was like, start him again. He'll be really good. He had a really good game against New Orleans, so he's just gonna have that juice for this game, but it didn't happen. It was kind of a dud. He did suffer a neck injury in that game and had to be pulled out for a bit. So I think going forward, he was able to go back into the game, and I think going forward he will be fine. Curtis Samuel was a big surprise for me for this game. I think he's only owned in 20% of leagues on Yahoo, so that's kind of a big steal there if you're able to get him. And then the other game that I happened to watch was Pittsburgh and the Ravens. I did sit Lamar for Baker Mayfield, so I was watching this game more so to keep me sane with the reason why I benched Lamar. But turns out he actually had more
Bad call.
points. He had more points than Baker Mayfield, and he threw a
Okay.
pick six. He had 2 TDs, 2 picks. He had passed for 208 yards. He had 16 rushes for 65 yards, which was tied for the most carries rushing for the offense. He was tied with Gus Edwards with 16 there. And Willie Snead was, I guess, his breakout receiver for that game. 5 receptions, 106 yards. And the whole time I was watching the game, it was kind of like, where the hell is Marquise Brown? I mean, Marquise Brown is a really good wide receiver. He's very fast and electrifying. Just wasn't getting the ball, and he expressed his frustrations about not getting the ball on Sunday. I believe he had a tweet come out, about him not catching any passes or things like that, and then deleted it. I'm expecting Marquise Brown to have a good game because usually when a receiver does that and call out their quarterback of the offense and not getting the ball, you could expect them to be getting the ball soon. So I'm sure he'll find his way there in that offense. But Big Ben, holy smokes, Big Ben, 182 yards, kind of a slow game for him, but 2 passing TDs. It was a pretty good game for him managing that and finding new targets like Eric Ebron, who had 4 receptions, 48 yards and a TD. Just a tight end coming out of nowhere, which is kind of good for the tight end game because tight ends are kind of low options right now. There's not really much to go around for. Juju Smith-Schuster, 7 receptions for 67 yards, and Chase Claypool, who I thought would have had a bad game this week. 5 receptions for 42 yards and a TD. He did have that fumble in the game, which I was a little like, holy smokes. Claypool, you can't be letting go of the ball like that. It's you got to hold on to it. Can't drop it on the ground there. Yeah, and so with that, we'll probably just head on into some of the injuries that happened over the weekend. Johnny, if you want to go over some of them.
Yeah, just before we get into injuries, Anthony, I just wanted to mention I'm finally glad that J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards had the rushing game that they needed. I think it was actually very good that Mark Ingram was injured and they had the opportunity to play. Against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, I think Dobbins did amazing with 113 rushing yards. So I hope Baltimore uses him more in the future, especially seeing what he can do against a Steelers defense.
Yeah, I got Dobbins on my team, and I was a little hesitant to start him, but I ended up going through with it for this game against Pittsburgh because Mark Ingram was out, and I thought they would want to get him more carries, seeing as he is a rookie, and you want to get him more involved. They spent a pretty high draft pick on him in the second round, so just want to see what he can do. He was able to produce, so hopefully, moving forward, they kind of use him more because I could use it for my fantasy running backs. But yeah, going into the injuries, I know you talked about Calvin Ridley, but who's another wide receiver that you had from the injuries on Sunday?
Yeah, so going to the Detroit Lions game there, Kenny Golladay, he got injured quite early and he had to leave the game from a hip injury. So I believe it's already stated that he is going to miss week 9 with that injury. So I think Marvin Jones is definitely a good option. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But another wide receiver there on the Indianapolis Colts, T.Y. Hilton, he's out with a groin injury. Not too sure how major it is, but definitely look out for that if you own him. I don't think he's owned in too many leagues. I think 62% or something like that. But definitely look out for that.
Yeah, and then the obvious big news here is George Kittle out for 8 weeks with a fractured foot. George Kittle, one of the best tight ends in the game right now. It sucks to see that he's injured, and for some of the people that drafted him very high or people that traded for him, very unfortunate injury. Owned in 99% of leagues on Yahoo. Is probably just dropped because of people just dropping him right now. If you do have him in like a dynasty league, that's awesome, cool. He'll come back next year healthy, good, and ready to go. For those of you that aren't in a dynasty league or anything like that, it kind of sucks. The best thing to do is just hope for the best, and hopefully you have a streamer that you could pick up. But we'll go into some tight ends that are able to help your team out for next week and hopefully for the future. Another injury that was kind of a surprise to me, Jonathan Taylor. He had a minor ankle injury in the game. I don't think this will affect his status for his game next week. But we'll have to keep up with that injury report and see from there. We got some information about some of the running backs there in Indianapolis, and we'll head on into our starts and sits for this week.
Yeah, let's take a look at what we said last week and how accurate these are. I know you had the start, so let's start with you.
Yeah, so I was saying, we did talk about Teddy Bridgewater for a bit. That was not great. But then I also went really deep into Carson Wentz. He was my other pick for our starts last week, and he was absolutely atrocious in the game. He wasn't the best. Carson Wentz was 15 for 27. He only passed for 123 yards. He had two passing TDs, two interceptions though. He was sacked 4 times. He had 4 rushes for 17 yards, and he had two fumbles as well. His passer rating was 61.2, which is very, very bad. It's just something you don't want to see from a quarterback that has a really easy matchup like that, especially against the Dallas Cowboys. Like I said, it was surprising to see Kyle Allen do really well against them, and very disappointing to see Carson Wentz struggle against them. The only hope that Carson Wentz really had was Travis Fulgham, who had 6 receptions for 78 yards and a TD. Another Eagles player I said to start for that game was Boston Scott. He was really good. He had 15 rushes for 70 yards. He was targeted twice, 2 receptions for 9 yards. Hopefully that helped you out in your PPR leagues. But this game was kind of a dud for the Eagles offensively, which I was surprised to see. And hopefully, we could fix that moving forward with the Eagles.
Yeah, it was pretty, like you said, it was pretty much a dud game. I mean, the Eagles did score 23 points, but it kind of just felt like it was nothing last night. It was very strange. Cowboys, obviously, they got nothing going for them. They got a lot of issues, especially in their defense. I know Amari Cooper owners, they're going to be quite scared right now without a Dak Prescott, without an Andy Dalton. It's definitely concerning.
Yeah, for sure. And then, oh man, going into the wide receivers, I said to start. I was saying Rashard Higgins and Jarvis Landry because Baker Mayfield was doing amazing. And then I'm watching this game with Baker Mayfield throwing the ball around and whatnot, trying to make plays, and it was just not happening at all. Jarvis Landry only had 4 receptions for 52 yards. He was targeted 11 times, which the volume's there, but he's just got Baker Mayfield's just got to get him the ball. There was a play where Jarvis Landry did catch the ball in the end zone. They were saying touchdown, but then there was a flag, and then it got called back. So that was very disappointing. That would have definitely helped me with helping you out. But I also said to start Rashard Higgins, and he only had 1 reception for 14 yards, targeted 3 times. So, yes, you could say that I definitely fucked that up for you guys, whoever started Rashard Higgins or Jarvis Landry. But hopefully we could get this together for this week. So, yeah, we'll move on from that.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue when you want to start two receivers with Baker Mayfield as your QB. I think you gotta get off of Baker Mayfield's back, Anthony, and you might have to look for someone else.
Yeah, I was believing the hype, I was just going for it, and next thing you know, he just fucked me up. So I'm not gonna believe the hype anymore. Next time Baker Mayfield has a good game, next week to bench him, and then the week after you start him.
Yeah, you might be onto something there.
Yep, it's just following the pattern. So, the running back, also said to start. I did say Boston Scott, and we did go over his good numbers, but I also said to start DeAndre Swift. And guess what? DeAndre Swift did not have a good game against the Indianapolis Colts. Of course, this is my luck right now, and we are just starting out this podcast, and it's just been fantastic. But DeAndre Swift, he had 6 rushes for 1 yard, and he was targeted 4 times. He had 3 receptions for 22 yards. Not a great game at all offensively, rushing the ball for the Detroit Lions. They were just playing catch up the whole way through, falling behind pretty fast. The Indianapolis Colts, who just started putting up points on the board immediately, and then having the Lions catch up is kind of a struggle. And with Galladay, or yeah, Kenny Galladay being injured, it was just bad all around. So hopefully they kind of get things moving forward and going back into rushing the ball and everything. But yeah, we'll just move on from that one because that was absolutely my bad.
Hey, I don't blame you. I think I probably would have started DeAndre Swift as well. He's been having a good stretch of games, so I know the Colts do have a decent defense, which that may have hurt his chances. But like I said, I think I would have started him either way.
Oh well, I appreciate that, Johnny. Thank you so much for
Of
for
course,
boosting my ego a bit. But
that's what I'm
you
here
know,
for.
the tight ends now. Oh, this was absolutely horrendous. Jimmy Graham, I thought would have his revenge game against the Saints, but he didn't. 2 receptions for 13 yards, targeted 7 times. The volume was there. He's tied second in targets behind Allen Robinson, but just wasn't able to produce at all, just to up to my standards that I needed him to pull through. And then the other tight end, Noah Fant, he was pretty decent from what I saw. 7 receptions, 47 yards, targeted 9 times. He just couldn't find the end zone. So he's getting the opportunities there. And with Jerry Judy there as well, he's going to be taking some targets. But they don't have Tim Patrick, but I think he's coming back from injury. So hopefully this connection with Noah Fant continues with Drew Lock. It was kind of amazing to see them come back and win the game against the Chargers. So hopefully Noah Fant is someone that you can be able to pick up and use in that tight end position that we've been struggling to see all year.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely stay tuned later. I do mention Fant in my starts for this week, so definitely listen for that. But let's move on to my sits that I had for this past week. So we'll start at the QB position. Kirk Cousins, obviously, if you're going to start Kirk Cousins, I don't know, you're probably not in the top 6 in your league. I'm going to say that right now. He had a terrible game. It was a Dalvin Cook game, obviously, like we all saw. 4 touchdowns. He had a tremendous amount of yards. Obviously, the Packers defense is good against the pass and terrible against the run. So that was an automatic sit for me. Next up, we had Jared Goff against the Dolphins. That was a toss up. It could go either way, really, with Miami. You don't really know. But it paid off for me. Goff only put up like 12 fantasy points against the Miami Dolphins. He didn't look great. They had a big loss against the Dolphins. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do next week. All right, moving on to my wide receiver sits of the week. We had Justin Jefferson. That was a tough one for me. I like Justin Jefferson a lot, especially what he's been able to do this year. And it worked out again. He didn't put up a great game. I think he only had around, I don't know, Anthony, like 3 fantasy points against that Green Bay defense.
Yeah, he did not
So
have
that
a
paid
good
off.
game.
No, 4 fantasy points here I'm seeing right now. 3 receptions, 26 yards. He really didn't do much. My next sit was your boy Chase Claypool. That could have gone either way,
Yep.
obviously. Baltimore's they're very good on defense, obviously, with the Steelers being most likely the number 1. But Claypool did have a TD, so I guess that didn't pay off for me. But he did have a decent game against those Ravens. For running backs for my sits, I did say sit David Montgomery against my Saints. That paid off, I think, pretty well. He did have a strong 30-yard run there in the second half. But other than that, he didn't get into the end zone. They use him a lot, which is very interesting to see why he doesn't get points. But again, it worked out for me. My second here was Carlos Hyde. Obviously, he was injured. DJ Dallas had the start for the Seahawks just because all 3 of those running backs were out. So moving on to tight ends, both of our tight ends are actually playing tonight in the Monday game. Rob Gronkowski and Evan Ingram. So I guess we'll see what happens there with them.
Yeah, I hope they have the best games ever, and you're wrong about sitting them.
I hope I'm right.
Alrighty, so we'll go
All right,
into
let's move. You
yeah,
can go ahead, Anthony.
yeah, we'll go into the starts and sits for this week, and I'll start off with the first quarterback to sit, Philip Rivers. You know, week 8 going against the Detroit Lions, he had 23 completions for 33 attempts, 262 yards, and 3 TDs. You know, they're right now they're going to be going up against the Baltimore Ravens for week 9. Not a good matchup at all, in my opinion, just because of seeing what Phil Rivers has you know, gone through this year with the interceptions. He currently has 6 INTs this year, and he's and the highest ranked defense he's played against was the Chicago Bears, where he was 16 of 29, 190 yards, and 1 TD. The Ravens defense is ranked second in the NFL, so you know I'm kind of expecting Philip Rivers to not have his best game. The Ravens defense also blitz the second most in the league, and they have the second most QB knockdowns with 28 on the season. The last time Rivers has played against the Baltimore Ravens, it was 2018, week 16. You know, he had 23 completions for 37 attempts, 181 passing yards, 2 INTs, and he was sacked 4 times. This Ravens defense does have um, it's very different from when Philip Rivers had played against them back in 2018. You know, a bunch of new faces, new players, more speed on the defense. So I'm thinking that with those new pieces added to that team, it's just going to be a complete shit show for Philip Rivers, and it's not going to be one of his best. So he's definitely a sit option, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with T.Y. Hilton out now as well. I don't think he has many options to go to. If Taylor does play, that's obviously better for that Colts offense. But even if he does, I don't think Rivers puts up a lot of points.
Yeah, and who'd you have for like a start option there for quarterbacks?
Starting option for this week for me, number one would be Drew Lock. He is coming off of a decent game, like you mentioned earlier, against those Chargers, coming back at the end there to win with 248 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. So he definitely had his best game fantasy wise and in real life, obviously, in the season so far. Chargers do allow 251 passing yards per game, so it's decent, it's right in the middle. But next week when they go up the Atlanta Falcons, obviously we know Falcons defense isn't great, allowing over 311 passing yards on average per game, making them the second worst in the league behind the Seahawks. I believe Tim Patrick actually should be active next week as well, coming off of an injury from week 7, I believe. Sorry, week 6. So it might be even tougher for that Falcons defense to stop, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, like you mentioned, Tim Patrick now, Philip Lindsay, Melvin Gordon. So they got things going for them for sure. Falcons are also allowing 28 points per game. So I'd say Locke's going to keep it up with these passing touchdowns.
Yeah, that's absolutely an amazing player to just pick up and start in the lineup, especially going against Atlanta Falcons. And Drew Lock coming off a pretty hot game against the Chargers there and winning it in the end. So I'm kind of hoping that Drew Lock has a big game against the Falcons, and it might show people, in that division, that it's not only Patrick Mahomes who has a strong arm.
Yeah, exactly. Anthony, who's your second QB sit this week?
So this one might be a little controversial, or not even a little. It might be pretty big or pretty blasphemous, even if you want to quote Stephen A. Smith there. But the next quarterback I have to sit is Aaron Rodgers, and this is
Wow.
because Aaron Rodgers. It's not only because of his Week 8 performance against the Vikings. He was a really good quarterback there. Option there. 27 completions, 41 attempts, 291 yards, and 3 TDs. Aaron Rodgers, very good quarterback, but just not feeling it against the 49ers. The 49ers D line right now, it's not the same on paper or talent wise as opposed to when it was for the NFC Championship game last year. But however, they're still a very good defense overall. They're ranked 10th against the pass, and they have 8 interceptions this year. And with Richard Sherman out, they've had Jason Verrett, cornerback, who's was pretty good in the NFL before some of the injuries he suffered. I think he suffered a few ACL injuries, but he's come back. He's healthy now, and he's on the 49ers, and he's been playing outstanding. He's allowed 42% completion percentage, and he's only given up 70 yards total this season and 0 TDs. And, like I said, Aaron Rodgers against the 49ers is not good at all statistically. And, his week 1 performance in 2019 against the 49ers, he had 20 completions for 33 attempts, 104 yards, 1 touchdown. He was sacked 5 times. He had 1 fumble, and he lost that fumble. The NFC Championship game, 31 completions, 39 attempts, very good, 326 yards. Okay, awesome. But he had 2 TDs, 2 interceptions. He was sacked 3 times. He fumbled the ball 3 times and lost it once. And with the Packers, coming off a game that they lost against the Vikings, uh, where the Vikings just ran all over the Packers. I'm kind of seeing the 49ers going to be doing the exact same thing against them, where Raheem Mostert in that NFC Championship game, he had 29 rushes for 220 yards and 4 TDs. Jimmy Garoppolo only needed to pass the ball for 8 attempts. He completed 6 of his passes for 77 yards. So like even with Nick Mullins starting instead of Jimmy Garoppolo, it doesn't really matter. Like the 49ers can just run the ball on anybody, and I think they'll do the same thing the Vikings did and just run the ball, keep Aaron Rodgers off the field, make them play catch up a bit with the points and make them one-dimensional offensively, and it'll just ruin the Packers game plan. So that's why I'm saying to bench Aaron Rodgers this week. Very controversial pick, but that is my big sit, I'd say, for this week.
Hey, you might be onto something. You never know. I mean, the 49ers defense is pretty roughed up this season just because of injuries, but like you said, the Vikings pretty much ran all over them. So you never know what's going to happen with Rodgers.
Yeah, exactly. And who's your other option to start in case if someone has Aaron Rodgers?
Another controversial one here, just like you mentioned with Rodgers, I'm going to say Cam Newton. He hasn't looked great the past few weeks, especially coming off of that Bills game. He did look a little better than what he has in previous weeks. But yeah, I'd say he's a good start this week. They are playing the New York Jets. So, I mean, if a team's playing the New York Jets, you want to start anyone on that team. They're allowing 282 passing yards a game, which isn't even, I mean, it's pretty bad, but I mean, it's not as bad as you'd think, just because you can really do whatever against the Jets. You can run it, you can pass it, you can do whatever. So a lot of teams do like to run against them. But obviously, he's a good scrambler. I think he's going to get a lot of rushing yards in that game. I think he's going to throw at least a touchdown, maybe a rushing touchdown as well. As we saw with the Chiefs, Pat Mahomes kind of lit them up. I think Mahomes threw like 5 touchdowns or something. So I think Cam Newton is a good start despite those Patriots having a lot of those injuries. But like we said, we don't know who's going to be on this team next week. It could be AJ Green. It could be another receiver. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, like I don't think Cam will throw for 5 TDs against this Jets defense, but he definitely can because he's that talented. But it's just that his wide receiver core is not that great like Pat Mahomes is. But I'm thinking he is definitely a solid start option. That's a pretty good pick there.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's going to go out and prove that, he's still Cam Newton like he was a year or two ago. And yeah, I think he's going to have a good game. So who's your sit option for your wide receivers?
All right, so my sit option here, number one, for the wide receiver position is CD Lamb. CD Lamb has been absolutely horrendous as a fantasy option at the wide receiver position since Dak Prescott went down, and when since Andy Dalton has been injured. He's had some pretty good opportunities to really capitalize on his numbers, and for the big matchups that you want for him to produce in those games, and he just hasn't been able to do it. He wasn't able to execute against Washington. He was targeted 5 times. He had 0 receptions. He had 1 carry for 1 yard. If you started CD Lamb that week, oh boy, I feel sorry for you. You must have lost your mind seeing him just only produce that much and watching the game or anything. This guy was drafted so high, and just to produce that is just really upsetting to see. And, week 8 last week against the Eagles, 5 targets. He had 4 receptions for 27 yards, 1 rush for 19 yards. Like as a number one wide receiver that was drafted fairly high from Oklahoma, like you would not expect these weak numbers from him. I know that's just also too that there's Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. It's a lot of guys to feed on that offense, and Zeke himself too. But CeeDee Lamb was kind of like someone that you would expect to be pretty good, like a Chase Claypool option. But we just haven't been able to see it. Dallas next week is going to be going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Very tough defense. I do not think Vinucci. I don't know what's his last name.
Yeah, same thing. It's whatever.
Yeah, either him or Dalton. Don't think either one of them could get it done against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. That's a very good defensive unit. They've been playing together for quite some time, so it's just a very tough matchup for me. So that's why CeeDee Lamb is a sit for this week.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Anthony. I think Dallas is obviously their season is over. Like I mentioned earlier, Amari Cooper, he's not been doing well. Gallup, he's pretty much been erased from this offense this season. Dalton Schultz, he looked decent at the start. He's not doing much anymore. And with CD Lamb, like you said, with his high production early on in the season, I think it's pretty much over now.
Yeah, and like I just wouldn't know exactly who to really pick up. So if you have a guy that I could pick up and start, who would that be?
Well, I'll give you one right now. So my wide receivers start for this week. One of them is going to be Marvin Jones Jr. So like we mentioned earlier, with Kenny Golladay out for next week, I think Marvin Jones is going to do excellent. He had a great game, obviously, yesterday when Golladay left. I think he put up around 18.9 fantasy points there. What did he have? He had 7 targets, only 3 receptions for 39 yards, but he did have 2 touchdowns. So I think he's a great option, especially going up against Minnesota next week. They're obviously not great with the pass defense. So I think obviously again, he's going to make a great addition to your team if you can get him on the waiver wire. Only owned by 49% of teams right now, so I think you have a good chance of getting him.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna put in a waiver for Marvin Jones then.
Good,
Yeah,
I'm glad.
my other wide receiver to sit for this week is Devontae Parker. Now Devontae Parker has been a very good option with Fitzmagic in the lineup and everything. Now they're going up against the Arizona Cardinals and with Tua Tagovailoa now at quarterback. I kind of was watching that game a bit, and I was kind of noticing a bit of Tua struggling passing the ball a bit. Maybe he just wasn't. It's hard to get comfortable when you have Aaron Donald in your face coming at you all the time. So that's definitely an option there, but um, it was tough to see that Tua was struggling passing the ball against the Rams, and when the Rams were without Jalen Ramsey, Devontae Parker was only targeted twice. He had one reception for 3 yards and a TD. It was pass interference as well on the defense. It was a spectacular grab and very accurate pass by Tua. But Devontae Parker, number one wide receiver in Miami, it was just unfortunate to see he had a really rough game against the Rams without Jalen Ramsey. So he's a sit for this week. The Cardinals defense, they're very good against the pass. They've allowed 885 yards, which is 10th in the NFL. And I feel like the Miami Dolphins game plan is to protect Tua and make him make the easy throws instead of trying to make the big play. His longest pass completion was 15 yards, and Miles Gaskin had 18 carries for 47 yards and a TD. So I just don't see Devontae Parker as an option for this week going against the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I agree with you. I did pick up Tua in one of my leagues just because, you never know how he's going to do. I know Justin Herbert, we didn't expect him to do much. He's going off right now,
Yeah.
especially for fantasy. So, yeah, you never know. Obviously, it's going to take a couple of games for Tua to settle in with that Dolphins playbook, get him to learn it a little more, get him to learn his teammates a little more, form that chemistry. So I think Tua will definitely settle in within the next couple of weeks. But right now, I think it's safe to sit those Dolphins receivers.
Yeah, for sure. And who's your second option there to, start this week?
So for my second option for a start, it's definitely a riskier start for sure, but I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
say Russell Gage.
Mm-hmm.
Like we mentioned earlier with Calvin Ridley, most likely out for this week against those Denver Broncos. I think Gage could put up numbers like he was at the beginning of the season. I know he's putting up 12, 9 targets in those first couple of weeks. So I think he could definitely get back to those numbers this week, most likely being the number 2 receiver behind Julio Jones. You never know, obviously, what that Falcons offense is thinking, but I think Russell Gage definitely has an increased chance to see those targets and receptions.
Yeah, like Matt Ryan's a pretty good quarterback and he's able to get his receivers the ball, and those receivers are very good with their routes and everything. So I feel like Russell Gage is good with getting open and getting the production if Calvin Ridley is out. So yeah, definitely a pretty good option there to pick up. I was trying to look for him in our league, but it seems like someone already got to him. But yeah, one of the running backs I said to sit is Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor, we did say has a minor ankle injury, so we're gonna evaluate that as the week goes on. But he had a pretty tough outing last week against the Lions. He had 11 rushes for 22 yards, 3 targets, 2 receptions for 9 yards. Now, with the ankle injury news coming out, I feel like that was maybe it played a bit into why Wilkins had outstanding production and having his 20 rushes for 89 yards, a TD, and one reception for 24 yards. Um, I just feel like, with Jonathan Taylor only playing 26 snaps, whereas Wilkins played the 39, it's just definitely something you want to see and try to move forward with maybe the waivers. But Jonathan Taylor will definitely be a sit. An ankle injury is pretty big for a running back, but they did say it's minor. So just definitely keep an eye out for how it goes on with the news. And Jonathan Taylor is also going up against the Ravens. So I feel like with a tough physical defense like that, it's just very hard to trust him. The Ravens have given up the fifth least rush yards to opposing offenses, which is 702 yards. So definitely a sit for this week. Who do you got for a start, Johnny?
So for one of my starts this week, I did say I actually sit him last week. This is going to be David Montgomery on the Chicago Bears. Going up against a questionable Titans defense, I think Montgomery will have a strong rushing game. Obviously, if you're going to play New Orleans, you're most likely going to lose the game, so there's no point in starting any players. But, he did put up 12 and a half fantasy points against those Saints. So, I mean, that's not terrible. He didn't hit the end zone, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast. But, again, with the Titans, you never know. They gave up 31 points to the Bengals. So you really don't know how it's going to go with this Bears offense. They're super questionable, obviously. The QB situation there is just, it's god awful. Nick Foles, he's not looking great. Obviously, Mitch Trubisky, he's a bust in the first round. But you never know. They obviously love to use David Montgomery, and I think he will find the end zone in this matchup. Obviously, not to mention, like I just said, they love to use him. He had 5 targets, only 2 receptions, but he did have a season high 21 rushing attempts. And they really don't have another running back option besides him. The Titans do allow on average 128 rushing yards per game. So I think Montgomery is a great option to start this week.
Yeah, like Montgomery has a lot of volume as a running back, but he just struggles to get in the end zone. Like that's his thing. So if he
Yeah,
gets in that end zone, like the points are just gonna roll in from there. Like he's just gonna get the volume, the touches, and everything, and then it's just a boom for him, and then he's just gonna go off. So I'm sure he'll be able to find the end
exactly. Yeah.
zone against the Tennessee Titans, like you said. Another running back I said to sit was James Robinson of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Recently, news came out by Doug Marone speaking to the media that Gardner Minshew will be out this week against the Houston Texans with a thumb injury. And I also found out that Jake Luton, the sixth round rookie, will be making a start for this week against the Houston Texans. So, with that being said, I feel like Texans, with them being one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, makes it kind of easier for them to play against the run with Minshew out and trying to put the ball into Jake's hands to try to make a play. So I think James Robinson is a sit for this week. The last time James Robinson went against the Texans, he only scored 10 points. He had 13 carries for 48 yards, 5 receptions for 22 yards, and one fumble. Lost it as well. So that's why he's a sit for me for this week.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I did trade for him in one of my leagues actually just a couple of weeks ago. So that kind of hurts for you to say that. But obviously, I'm hoping he goes off. But exactly, you never know. With Minshew out, you don't know how that offense is going to roll.
Yeah, exactly. And then definitely trying to look for a running back to pick up and start. So who's your option there to start for this week?
He might not be available in too many leagues on that waiver wire, but I'm gonna say for my second start option for a running back is gonna be Jerick McKinnon. Like you mentioned earlier, the Niners are going up against a Packers defense who are terrible with the run defense, like we just saw last week against the Vikings. Cook had 226 yards, putting up 48.9 fantasy points. I think that's the most out of any running back this season, which is wild. If you lost with him in your lineup, that's kind of sad. But moving on, I think McKinnon's going to be a solid option. They didn't use him too much actually last week. They used JaMychal Hasty more so for the rushing game. McKinnon was actually used more so as a receiver, although he did have one rushing touchdown. I think McKinnon's going to be a great option. Obviously, again, Packers have terrible run defense. I think McKinnon and Hasty are going to tear it up, and I think he's going to put up points.
Yeah, and I find this so funny too because we were saying, like, I was saying that, the 49ers are going to be running the ball all over the Packers and that Jerick McKinnon used to be a Minnesota Viking. So maybe he'll channel his inner Minnesota Vikings and being like Dalvin Cook and just run all over the Green Bay Packers defense and, put up a lot of points this week for some fantasy owners.
Hey, you never know. It might happen.
Yeah, it could happen. Anything's possible in fantasy. Uh, you know,
Exactly.
a sit tight end for this week is Jonu Smith. The Tennessee Titans going against the Chicago Bears. It's just Jonu Smith just hasn't been getting a lot of production lately. Um, the ball's kind of been going to, as Johnny had stated earlier, Corey Davis and, AJ Brown, and then handing the ball off to Derrick Henry. So Smith's production has been falling off, against the Houston Texans week 6, one reception for 13 yards. Against Pittsburgh, week 7, one reception for 9 yards. Week 8 against Cincinnati, two receptions for 29 yards. So it's just really tough for Jonu Smith right now to get the ball into his hands. He had the last game that he played in week 5. I believe he had his big game of like 2 touchdowns. But that was pretty much it since then. And then we're just hoping to have him bounce back, but he's just not a start option this week at all. So definitely try to avoid him.
Yeah, he didn't look great against the Bengals, which is very surprising to say. So I definitely agree with you to sit him this week.
Yeah. So who's your tight end that you want to start for this week?
Another risky one here for the tight end position. My
Mm-hmm.
first tight end start is going to be Logan Thomas on the Washington football team. So coming off of a bye week, they are playing the New York Giants back at home. I know I say it every week to you. The Giants aren't that great. We already know that. Despite having decent coverage against tight ends, I think Logan Thomas is going to put up points against the Giants. He did just play them, I believe, 2 weeks ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he did put up 11.7 points against the Giants with 3 receptions and 42 yards, plus a touchdown. So I think this next upcoming week, I think Thomas is going to put up the same amount of numbers, if not even more.
Yeah, it was pretty much 2 weeks ago in week 6 matchup. He was a pretty good option there for the receivers, and there's not really much talent after Terry McLaurin, so the tight end is definitely a good safety option for the quarterbacks. But in this scenario, with this quarterback, Hunter Henry is just not a reliable option to start as a tight end. He struggled to find the end zone, so it's kind of like that David Montgomery where he gets the production, but he just can't get the end zone to put him over the top. Over the last 4 games, Henry's production has dramatically dropped. He's only been targeted 23 times, catching 13 balls for 118 yards and 1 touchdown. And the only time that he did score this year was week 5, and that was when Keenan Allen left the game against the Saints. So Hunter Henry's only like an option when Keenan Allen is out or if someone else were to go down. So he's definitely not a start for me this week.
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely a questionable offense that they have there. So I think I agree with you to sit him for this week.
Yeah, and then we'll move on to our waiver wires for this week. Drew Lock, like you said, he was definitely a start for this week, owned in 10% of leagues in Yahoo, and going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Same with Cam Newton. You also stated earlier, owned in 63% of leagues. So they're definitely quarterbacks that you could stream on the waiver wire and start. Cam Newton going against the Jets. So the running backs, if you want to take a look at that, you could definitely share with some of the people here, Johnny.
For sure. Yeah. Like I mentioned with Jerick McKinnon earlier, I think Jermichael Hasty also shares a lot of those snaps with him. I think they're going to use him a little more in the rushing game this week. while using Jarek as a more of a receiver. But yeah, like I said, Packers terrible run defense. I think they're going to absolutely obliterate them. So I'd say JaMychal Hasty is a good option. Only owning 42% of leagues on Yahoo. So I believe that is a decent pickup for you. Another one is DJ Dallas. This is if Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde aren't back. It sounds like Chris Carson might be, so it might be DJ Dallas as the backup running back for that game, but you never know. His status is still uncertain, so you might want to put in a claim for him just in case. You might want to wait just so you don't use your claim, but you never know. They're going up against the Buffalo Bills. They're definitely in the middle of the pack for run defense. DJ is only owned in 25% of leagues, so I think he's definitely a good option for you.
Yeah, okay. And then for the wide receivers, I had Darnell Mooney, the rookie wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. He's owned in 6% of leagues on Yahoo. He's kind of looking like the number two wide receiver behind Allen Robinson. And Anthony Miller is kind of a big name, making a big name for himself right now. He had like 11 targets, I think, last week. Um, which is the most against the Saints. So he's kind of a good player, but I think Mooney is kind of going to become that guy. Mims uh, is suspended for 2 games, or Wims, sorry, Javon Wims, the wide receiver, is suspended for 2 games after his, fight with Chauncey Gardner Johnson, the Saints player there. I think everybody has saw that. So Darnell Mooney is definitely an option. He had 6 targets, 5 receptions, 69 yards, and a TD. And like we said earlier, big surprise for me, Corey Davis, owning 48% of the leagues on Yahoo. Over the past 2 weeks, he's had 20 targets, 14 receptions, 163 yards, and 2 TDs. He's looking like the number two wide receiver behind AJ Brown. And it's kind of good because while Brown takes the attention from defenses, Corey Davis will be able to get the attention from Tannehill and just get the ball in his hands consistently.
Yeah, like I mentioned right before we started recording it, Corey Davis kind of took me by surprise while I was watching that Bengals game yesterday. So I think he's definitely a great option, especially in PPR leagues for sure. Even though he's only owned in 48% of leagues, I think you have a good shot at getting him this week.
Yeah, I wish he was available in my league because I would definitely add him to my team.
Yeah, 100%. Moving on to the tight ends, I'd say Jordan Reed is definitely a good pickup now that we know George Kittle is most likely done for the year with a broken foot. Unless they make playoffs, he might be back. But until then, we are expecting that he's done for the season. So Jordan Reed only owning 3% of the leagues. He'll most likely become the starting tight end for that 49ers offense. So I think he's definitely a good pickup if you're struggling on that tight end position.
Yeah, and I was kind of surprised too. Like I was trying to think if it was it was kind of between him and the other tight end that the 49ers have. Yeah, it was kind of between Jordan Reed to pick up or Ross Dwelly. Between those two is kind of hard to decide, but I was looking at the waivers and clicked on Jordan Reed to see the news updates, and I saw that Kyle Shanahan had said that he's optimistic for Reed to play against the Packers this Thursday. So that's kind of a big reason as to why he would be reliable to pick up.
Yeah, for sure. I think against that Packers defense, he might be definitely a good option for you to pick up. Moving on, our next tight end to possibly pick up for this week. Another risky one here, Trey Burton on those Indianapolis Colts. Really depends on if T.Y. Hilton misses time. Even if he does, I think Burton is definitely going to be a good option for you. Own 22% of leagues. They are playing the Ravens, which is definitely a tough matchup. Baltimore falls right in the mix there with coverage on those tight ends. But you never know. Burton might go off. We know Philip Rivers loves to throw to his tight ends. Mo Alley Cox, he might be back this game. We don't know. But I'd say Burton's definitely a decent option, again, if you're struggling on the tight end position.
Cool, that's awesome. That's good to hear too. We definitely covered everything for this week and last week, so that's good. Hopefully, we get to hear from some of you guys. If you guys have any questions, you could definitely follow us on Instagram at FF in the six. We'll definitely give you a follow back and answer any of the questions that you have. Maybe we'll do it on the podcast. Definitely check out our YouTube channel as well. So yeah, definitely check us out on YouTube. It's FF in the six, and on Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts as well. We are on all platforms. So definitely check us out. Subscribe, like, share, everything. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great week, and good luck this week in your fantasy matchups.